Today's daf we're going to learn is Eruvin Lamed Hey. Today's daf is sponsored by Don Nadel on the Yurat side of his father, Melech ben Yehoshua Be'el, who is a Korno Levracha, who valued learning. Okay, we finished yesterday. We actually started, not exactly finished. We started with this case of Nitano b'migdal. You put your Eruv in a tower or some sort of space with a key, and you lose the key. So again, what's the problem? You don't have access to the Eruv. But Tanakama says this, in fact, is an Eruv. And Rabbi Eliezer says, no, if you don't know where the key is, that doesn't count. Today, we're going to see there's actually three different interpretations to what the case of the Mishnah is. We started with the first interpretation in the previous class about it's like this case. What's the idea? It's true you don't have a key, but you could break the building and get to the Eruv. How can you break the building? Well, you have to explain, number one, and they base this on this explanation of this other Mishnah, about can you access the foods inside a closed, sealed house. So they say, well, if it's bricks, it was built with bricks that were one on top of the other, but not cemented together, number one. Number two, it's only on Yom Tov, okay? Because on Yom Tov, we allow Mishum Ochal Nefesh. What we're going to have to say is something like this. Again, there's a debate among the commentaries what exactly we mean. But some say that what we're talking about is it's still kind of like stira, breaking something. But since we're going to basically be more lenient, since it's Yom Tov and you want to get to food, because of Ochal Nefesh, we'll allow it. So likewise with our Eruv, since your Eruv is food, and we'll assume that we're talking only about Yom Tov. Okay, that's what they say right now. So now the Gemara says, we ended with Hachanami bi Yom Tov. Let's assume our Mishnah is only talking about Yom Tov. So now they say, Ihachi. If so, by the way, there's a sheet up. I didn't put it in the chat, but if someone wants to put it up in the chat, there's a sheet for today. Ihachi, if you're going to say it's about Yom Tov, so you can follow in the sheet and you'll see it charted out, the different approaches here. Ihachi hainu de katani ala, Rabbi Eliezer omer, im ba'ir avad eruvo eruv, ve'im b'sadeh avad ein eruvo eruv. So now they say that Rabbi Eliezer says, if it got lost in the city, then the eruv is an eruv. If it got lost in the fields, then it's no good. Now, if Rabbi Eliezer makes that distinction, right, in our Mishnah it says that he holds there's no Eruv, right? It doesn't count if you lose the key. But there was a Braita that says that Rabbi Eliezer starts to make this distinction whether you lost it in the city or whether you lost it in the fields. Now, what would be the difference between city and fields? The only difference would be, right, Mali ir Mali Sadeh. What would be, right, sorry, Ibi Yom Tov, Mali ir Mali Sadeh. The only difference between a city and the fields is whether you could carry it, right? You certainly can't carry something from the fields into the city. You can carry within the city because we'll see in a minute that Rabbi Shimon has this approach that you can carry through, if you remember, we learned this, through the karpafs, through the big open spaces, through the gagot, the roofs, right? There's ways to carry through the chatzerot from courtyard to courtyard. So according to this, what does he say basically? He distinguishes between those two. So if it gets lost in a place where theoretically one can carry, well, then it's okay. If it's a place where no one can carry, then it's not okay. Now, why would he make that distinction if we're talking about Yom Tov? Yom Tov, everyone can carry anywhere. So it doesn't make sense to say that the Mishnah is only talking about Yom Tov. So now they explain, wait a minute. You would have to read like this. In other words, it's missing words, and this is how it reads. Nitano b'migdal. So now let's start from our Mishnah and explain the Braita on our Mishnah and kind of fill in all the blanks. So, and in a way that would work that our Mishnah is still only talking about Yom Tov. Nitano b'migdal v'na'al b'fanav v'avan ha'mafteach harei ze eruv. Okay, so that's Tanakama of our Mishnah. B'ameh dvarim amurim. Here we start adding words. In what case is our Mishnah referring to? B'Yom Tov. Only on Yom Tov. Aval b'Shabbat ein eruvo eruv. Okay, comes the Tanakama who says it's an Eruv, would hold that if it's Shabbat, it doesn't work if you lose the mafteach, okay? And this is exactly what we described earlier, because you can break down this structure if it's Yom Tov. You can't break it down on Shabbat according to Tanakama. Now, what was Rabbi Eliezer talking about, this Sadeh the ear? It seems a little strange also. Why would it matter about carrying? You lost your key, so what are we talking about? So they assume that what's Rabbi Eliezer talking about when he makes that distinction between Sadeh and ear? If you find the key, what if you find the key throughout, whether it's Shabbat or Yom Tov? So let's see. Nimtza mafteach bein ba'ir bein b'sadeh ein eruvo eruv. According to Tanakama, if you find the key on Shabbat, okay, in other words, on Yom Tov, it works no matter what. You don't need to find the key because you can break the tower. But on Shabbat, you can't. However, if you find the key throughout Shabbat, Then what do we say? Well, bein be'ir, bein b'sadeh, ein eruv eruv, because what does he hold? You can't carry it, so there's nothing to do. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, he distinguishes now between ir and sadeh, and that's where that braita comes in. Be'ir eruvo eruv, b'sadeh ein eruvo eruv. Why is that? The city, yes, not the outside the city. Be'ir eruvo eruv, ki Rabbi Shimon de'amar, echad gagot, echad chatzerot, echad karpifot, reshut echadem lekelim sheshavtu b'tochan. What did we say? In the city, I explained this before, that it's according to Rabbi Shimon. If the key is found in the city, we're assuming it's not found in someone's house. It's found outside somewhere. So you can actually carry it through all these areas that are not houses, right? Houses are a problem. But if there are these outside areas, Rabbi Shimon has that unique opinion that we saw before in Masechet Shabbat, you can actually carry from any of these places to each other. We also saw it in Eruvin. What about Basadeh? Basadeh ein eruvo eruv ki Rabbanan. Now, ki Rabbanan is a little tricky. What Rabbanan are we talking about? So there's a debate among the Mefarshim which one. I'm going to go with one approach that says the Rabbanan here we're talking about is what's a field? A field is not Reshut HaRabim, it's a Carmelite. So now, who's Rabbanan? Remember we saw Rebbe and Rabbanan disagreed about Ben Hashmashot, right? Does something, are the Rabbanans asur Ben Hashmashot or not? So if you say, the Rabbi Eliezer says, if you find it in the field, it's going to be forbidden. That's going to be according to the rabbis who basically say, oh, in the field, you can't carry even Ben Hashmashot because the field is a Carmelite and you want to get it to whatever Reshut you're in. And Carmelite to any Reshut is only D'Rabbanan, but we don't care if it's D'Rabbanan if we hold by the rabbis. So Rabbi Eliezer is going to hold and be machmir like the rabbis. And this is interesting because he's lenient about Rabbi Shimon's approach that you could carry things through the roofs and all that, but you can't carry them from a Carmelite because that's asur mid'Rabbanan, right? The karpaf and all that is actually allowed. So he would have to hold like Rabbanan. Okay, that all explains. So again, just to review, this was all the first approach of Rav and Shmuel, who says we're talking about a tower of bricks, right? It's made of bricks, but not cemented together. It's going to be allowed on Yom Tov, not on Shabbat, because we're going to say, right, that we're basically going to have to say, because of Ochel Nefesh, we're going to allow, what we're really saying, it's interesting. We said it's not stira, but it really, most of the Mepharshim explain, it kind of is stira. You're taking apart something. So it's like an in-between. For Ochel Nefesh purposes, we'll allow it. For Shabbat purposes, right, when there's no issue of Ochel Nefesh and getting to the food inside, we're not going to allow it. And that's why the rabbis say, according to this, Tanakh is only going to allow this whole Mishnah is only on Yom Tov. Okay, which is interesting because if it really was only in Yom Tov, it should have said so in the Mishnah. Okay, but as we're going to see, all of these opinions are going to have to explain the Mishnah in some sort of unique case in order to have it make sense. So that was our first approach. Rabbi Rav Yosef to Amarei Chavayu, we get to now to our second answer. They're going to be, everyone's in pairs. We have Rabbi and Shmuel, then we have Rabbi and Rav Yosef. They say, Hacha b'migdal shel etz askinan. Demar savar klihu, ve'ein binyan b'kelim, ve'ein stira b'kelim. This might sound familiar to you. Umar savar olhu, period. So here's the machloket. We have a big, right? This is some big thing that we put it into, okay? It's a migdal, right? That's what they called it. A migdal is kind of a tower, a closet, some sort of thing like that, and we locked it. The issue is that this is bigger than 40, than something that could hold 40 se'ah. If you remember, we talked about this in Masechet Shabbat for purposes of Tum and Tara, right? That's generally considered the limit for a utensil. Once it's bigger than that, it's no longer a utensil. And once that happens, and they learn this all from the Mincha, we'll get to this later on, but let's just take that as a given right now. Once it's more than 40, we say that's the debate here. This is a utensil made of wood, and there's a debate about utensils made of wood, whether when they're more than 40 se'ah, do we still call that a utensil, or do we call it a tent? Okay, now the issue is obviously, okay, or seemingly obviously, that it's not attached to the ground. If it's attached to the ground, okay, imagine you get an IKEA closet, okay, those IKEA closets, right, you could attach them to the wall, you don't necessarily need to, right, some of them stand alone, or any kind of closet you get in your house. Some of your closets are attached to the wall, some of them aren't. So here we're going to say, if it's attached to the wall, we're going to consider that attached to the ground, and then it becomes like an ohel. And in an ohel, what's the difference between ohel and kli? Ohel is a tent, right? It's a structure. So binyan and stira, building and taking apart, would be forbidden on Shabbat in that kind of thing. But if we call it a utensil, there's an opinion, if you remember, that there's no such thing as binyan and stira in utensils. That's not part of the malacha here. So that's not a malacha. To break apart a kli is not asur because of stira. So therefore, that's going to be the machloket. Do we treat this, if it's not attached to the ground, do we treat it like an ohel or do we treat it like a kli? So that's the debate here. So if we say it's a kli, Tanakama says there's no problem with binyan, there's no problem with stira, that's all allowed. If we say it's an ohel, then we're going to say it's forbidden. So Rabbi Eliezer, who forbids, right, who says this eruv doesn't work because he thinks, again, it's very similar to the first case, the first explanation, because it's all about can you break this apart or not. It's just the issue is a different issue about why you can or why you can't. Now the Gemara suggests, we're going to see Tanaim, another machloket in a Mishnah, that we're going to assume seems to be the same machloket. Then they're going to reject and say it doesn't, but let's see. And this is actually talking about a zav. Okay, we've learned about the zav. He has tumah, right? And there's something called tumat hesed by a zav. If he moves something, okay, he causes something to move, it's a problem. That's called tumat hesed. He can make something tameh without touching it, but if he shoves something and that causes something else to move, it's a problem. So now we're going to see this Mishnah. Tanan. Hikish al gabei shida teva migdal. Here we have exactly our kind of case, a big utensil. What is it called? Right. If it's called a kli, then the zav is going to be mitame, this object. If it's called an ohel, generally we say a zav is mitame, right? Can be mitame other people, or kelim, utensils, or food. This would have to be called a kli, at least they think right now, in order to say it can have tumah to it. So hikish al gabei shida teva migdal tmeim. So if he knocks, right, bangs on it and causes it to move, right, he takes, let's say, a hammer, and he hammers it, and it moves over. So it becomes tameh. Rabbi Nechemia and Rabbi Shimon mitaharim. They say, no, it doesn't. So now they're going to assume, isn't this the root of the machloket? Mar savar klihu, mar savar oelhu. The one who says it's tahor, it's pure, would say, because it's an oel. And the zav doesn't transfer tumah to an oel, because it's so big, it's no longer a utensil. And the one who says it's tameh would say it's an ohel. It's a kli, okay? And a kli would become tameh. So that sounds like the exact same machlok. But Abai doesn't like this, and that's going to lead Abai to give a different explanation on our Mishnah. Amar Abai v'tizbara, is that true? That if we call it an ohel, and as I told you, this is if it's obvious, but he suggests, what do you mean? Just because you call something an ohel doesn't mean it's not going to have tumat hesed. Well, let's see where we know this from. V'hatanya ohel v'niset tameh. If something's an ohel and the zav moves it, it's actually impure. So here you see explicitly, even an ohel can become impure by a zav. Kli ve'eino niset tahor. If you have a utensil and the zav knocks on it, let's say, but doesn't actually move it, or knocks on something which causes it, right? But he doesn't move it, it's going to be pure. So here, what do you see? It doesn't matter, ohel or kli, right? What you call it. It's, right, no matter what, and here it says, v'katani seifa, imayuni sotim tmeim. It's all a matter of did he move it or did he not move it? And now we're going to see. Zehaklal. Niset machmat kocho tameh. If it's moved by something the zav does with his own power, okay, his own hands, he causes it, or his feet, or whatever it is, he does something and it causes it to move, it's going to be tameh, whether it's a kli, whether it's an ohel. That doesn't matter. What matters? It matters how he moves it. Is it with kocho, with what he does? Or machmat re'ada, if he just causes a vibration, and the vibration, in other words, if there's some vibration and the vibration causes it to move, then it's going to be tahor. So therefore, Ela Amar Abaye, so Abaye says, Dekule Alma has said machmat kocho tameh, machmat re'ada tahor. Everybody agrees. Now we're going to have to explain what's this machloket in the Braita. Everyone agrees. If it's he moves it from something he did, that's going to be tameh. If it's machmat re'ada tahor, if he causes something to vibrate, let's say he stamps on the floor vibrates, and that causes it to move, that's not going to be a problem. It doesn't become tameh. But what's the machloket between them? Hacha bera'ada machmat kocho askinan. What if he causes the dresser or whatever it is to shake, to vibrate? Okay, he bangs on the floor and it causes a vibration. Okay, but it doesn't cause it to move. That's what the machloket between them is. So ra'ada machmat kocho askinan ubahaka biflagei tamar savar have hesed. Causing something to vibrate is like causing it to move. Umar savar lo have hesed. Causing it to vibrate doesn't move. In which case, this machloket has absolutely nothing to do with our topic, and it actually seems clear here Abai says, I think you're wrong that that's the machloket between them, because according to this, even a large kli is still considered a kli and not an ohel. Or actually, I don't know if you would necessarily say that. He just thinks the zav is metame, either ohel or kli, that doesn't matter, but it's not the same machloket as here. Okay, so therefore, so then what would you say our Mishnah is about? We're now up to answer number 3. Okay, so again, just to review, answer number 1 was it was a tower of bricks. You lost the key. Why did the rabbi say, we don't care that you lost the key? You can still access your Eruv because you could take apart this building, and then it would have to be only on Yom Tov. According to Rabba and Rav Yosef, we're talking about a migdal made of etz, right? A wooden migdal. And the whole question is this called a kli or is it called an ohel? If it's called a kli, then there's no issue and it's fine. And that's why the rabbis say that it's okay. Rabbi Eliezer says it's an ohel and it's a problem. But Abai didn't like that answer, so he gives a different answer. So he and Rava, who often disagree, in this case agree. Abai v'Rava da'amrei travayu b'man'u v'katir b'matna askinan. It's a key that's tied around a rope, and there's a way you can basically cut the rope to unlock it. So you lose the key, but there's another way to get to it. But what's the problem? We're going to have to find that some way there's a problem. We're going to have to see. Ubai sakina lemifsike. It's not the kind of rope that you could tear with your hands or your teeth, let's say. You need a knife. What does it matter if you need a knife? Normally, right, what do we say? You can use a knife on Shabbat. You can take a knife and cut something as long as it's allowed to be cut on Shabbat. So we're assuming this is allowed to be cut on Shabbat. Okay, there's a debate. Some people say it's d'Rabbanan. It's really, you're kind of cutting is a problem, but only d'Rabbanan. It's not really the same issue of cutting in general. But anyway, let's put that aside. Let's assume you can cut it. Now, what's the issue? Tanakama savala ke Rabbi Yossi. Da'amar kol ha'kelim nitalim b'Shabbat chutz mimasach hagadol v'yatet shel machresha. Remember this machloket? Can you actually, I said, don't we know you can use a knife? Well, we're going to see the machloket. According to Rabbi Yossi, this is an issue of muktzah. All kelim, if you have a knife, anything like that, of course you can carry them on Shabbat. The only ones you're not allowed to carry, remember this is the minimalist approach to muktzah, are what we call kli machmah chesron kis, or muktzah machmah chesron kis. It's something that you only use for that particular reason, right? Like a big saw, or this piece of the plow that they would use. Okay, so those things are specifically, like those are going to be problematic. You can't use those on Shabbat, but if you need it even for a different reason. But if it's something that, if it's anything else, like a knife, you can carry that as long as you're using it for a permitted purpose. To Rabbi Eliezer, Savarla ke Rabbi Nechemia, Da'amar, afilu, remember Rabbi Nechemia had this extreme position, afilu talit, you can't even use a talit if you want it, or afilu tarvat, a spoon. Ein nitalim ela letzorach tashmishan. You can only use a kli for its clear purpose. Now, a knife is generally used to cut food, let's say, but it's not used to cut a rope. It can be, but that's not its typical purpose. So Rabbi Nechemia will say, you can't use that knife. So basically, if the only way you could cut this rope is using a knife, that's either you have the key and you lost the key, or you can take a knife. According to Rabbi Nechemia, which is basically Rabbi Eliezer, we're going to say, hold like Rabbi Nechemia, you can't move the knife to cut this rope. So it's muktzah, and therefore you can't use it. According to Tanakama, of course you can move the knife, and therefore it's not a problem. Okay, so that resolves, that's the last interpretation as to what's going on in our Mishnah, and then it becomes a muktzah issue. Now you might say if it's a muktzah issue, well, didn't we say Rebbe and Rebbe holds ben hashmashot? Muktzah is only d'Rabbanan, it should be allowed. So the Rabbi Ovadia Bar Tanura says that's only when there's only one d'Rabbanan, and the Rebbe won't allow 2 d'Rabbanans. And the issue of cutting this rope might be a d'Rabbanan issue of cutting, and therefore he doesn't allow you to do 2 things, both the rope and the muktzah of the knife. And that's why we're going to say it's a problem. Okay, that was just a little bit about that issue of cutting it. Anyway, we're going to move on now to the next Mishnah. So that whole thing was just 3, all we had so far in that, what we did with that Mishnah is come up with 3 different interpretations. What seems clear in a lot of this Mishnah, what we're seeing is that it's very hard for the rabbis to understand the simple reading of the Mishnah. And they have to basically say, this Mishnah must be talking about a very particular scenario, otherwise it doesn't really make sense, the simple reading of the Mishnah, right? Our main problem here was, how could you say if it's locked up and you don't have a key, That's a classic case of hu b'makom echad ve'eruv b'makom acher, right? He's in a different place in his eruv since he can't access it. We kept talking about accessibility, right? So just like with the previous Mishnah, where they had a very hard time trying to figure out what exactly is the case of the Mishnah, they kept narrowing with the tree and how high and why above 10 and below 10. Likewise here, they're struggling with how to interpret the Mishnah. And we have 3 different explanations. Okay, moving on to the next Mishnah. Nitgalgel chutz latchum. Let's say you put your eruv in the right place, but then it rolls away, okay? And it rolls outside, but basically what you generally do is you measure 2,000 amma outside your city limits, and then you put your eruv right there to give you the maximum walking space, right? Because that will basically, I want to also tell you something that will be relevant for later. Normally, if I don't put up an eruv, I have a radius of 2,000 amot around, right, from the outskirts of my city. If I put an eruv tchumen, 2,000 amma outside my city, which I'm allowed to do because that's as far as I can walk, then I get 2,000 amma from the eruv, and I no longer have a radius, right? Let's say I put it north of my house, so I can only go north 2,000 amma. I can't go south now. I can't go out of my city 2,000 amma in the southern direction because my eruv is that way, which means that I'm basically saying my house is not where my house is. My house is now where my eruv is. So I can walk in my city, but I can't walk outside my city at all, only in the direction of my eruv. It's my eruv that now has a 2,000 amma radius. Okay, so keep that in mind because we're going to get to something in a minute. Actually, later. No, it's in the. Yeah, no, it's in this Mishnah. We're going to get there about why that's relevant. So if I put a 2,000 amma, which is fine, but what if it rolls to 2,010 amma around the eruv? So, and you can't make a few eruvs. No, you basically have to say I'm living in one place for Shabbat. You can only have one eruv. So we'll get to a case where someone puts up an eruv misafek. Okay, like maybe this will be my eruv, maybe that will be. We'll get to that later, but theoretically, you can really only have one eruv that's effective. Okay, that was just answering a question someone asked. Okay, so now, if it rolls outside the tchum, so now it's no longer, I can't be konesh shvita there because I can't put up my eruv 2010 amot outside my city. And I can't do that. It has to be only 2,000. So if it rolled, I put it down in the right spot, but it rolled, it's a problem. Nafal alav gal, what if a whole bunch, right, there was an avalanche and it gets covered under rocks? Also a problem because I can't access it. It's kind of like the previous Mishnah. Onisraf, or it burns. Also a problem. It's no longer here. Truma v'nitmeit. If it was truma and it became impure, also we have to burn that. So it's basically considered nothing. So now it depends when this happened, though, and that's exactly what I see the questions that are being asked. Mi ba'od yom eino eruv. If this happened before the end of Ben Hashmashot, it's a problem. Meaning, it has to be there Ben Hashmashot, as we keep saying. But if any of these things happen, Misha Chashecha, once it already got dark, Harez eruv, then it's not a problem. But herein lies the problem. Normally, you're not with your eruv during the whole Ben Hashmashot time. So what if you get there the next day, you plan on taking your long walk to go visit someone or whatever reason, maybe for your mitzvah, if you hold only for a mitzvah, and you go to walk and you find your eruv, you find something happened to it. Either, I don't know how you found out that someone caused it to be impure. Someone would have had to tell you, oh, by the way, I noticed, but they don't know when this happened. So safek, and you don't know when it happened. So now we have a machloket. Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yehuda omrim hareze chamar gamal. I'll explain that in 1 minute. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon omrim safek eruv kasher. Okay, which basically means Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda say safek eruv is no good, and Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon say it is good. We can assume it was okay ben hashmashot. What is chamar gamal? Chamar gamal is kind of a funny phrase. It's someone who leads a donkey and someone who leads a camel. So here we have a person who's doing both. Now, you can't do both. Why? Because someone who leads a donkey is leading a donkey forward. Leads the donkey from behind. Someone who leads a camel leads the camel from in front of the camel. So you can't do both, right? You can't be leading in that direction and leading in that direction. So that's basically what they're saying with your eruv. If it's safek, well, then you're stuck because you don't know, was your eruv in your house, in which case you go 2,000 amma all around your city, or was your eruv in that place? If your eruv's there, that's what I told you before. If your eruv's there, you can't go 2,000 amma this way. So basically you're stuck. You can't leave your city or you can't leave where your eruv is because, right, you don't know where to go. You don't know where you're allowed, which was actually your eruv. So you're really stuck here. So, Amar Rabbi Yossi, Abtulmus he'i mishum chamishas kenim al safek eruv shekasher. So now Rabbi Yossi, to support his approach that it's okay, brings this testimony of Abtulmus, who says in the name of 5 kenim that it's kasher. Okay, now the Gemara is going to start going into all the cases that we mentioned in more in depth. And then we're going to spend a lot of time on Rabbi Meir's approach here, who's more stringent. Nitgalgel chutz letchum. Amar Rava lo shanu ela shenitgalgel chutz la'arba amot. First of all, he limits the Mishnah. He says, by the way, nitgalgel chutz letchum is not 2001, 2, or 3 amot. That's okay. Why is that? Because we already learned that. Aval letoch daled amot hanoten eruvo yesh lo daled amot. Remember, if you put down your eruv, you get 2,000 amot from your 4 amot. So you have 4 square amot around the eruv. So that means basically that it has to be outside of 4 amot, outside your daled amot of where your eruv is. And therefore, if it rolls to within the 4 amot, it just isn't in the original spot you put it, but it rolls 1 or 2 amot, let's say, that's totally fine. Nafal alav gal. So now, what's the issue that the rocks fall on top of it? So the rabbis first think, what do we know about rocks? What's classic? We know rocks are muktzah. So they assume that that's the problem, that to get to your eruv now, you have to move rocks, and rocks are muktzah. So now we're going to say, if that's the case, kasal kadatach, they thought, that theoretically he could remove the rocks, he just can't do it because they're muktzah. Well, then you'd have to say what? Lema manitin delo kirebi. Well, then you'd have to say, remember, muktzah is all derabanan. And if we're talking about ben hashmashot, then it shouldn't matter if a pile of rocks moves on it, because Rebbe says there's no derabanans during ben hashmashot, and therefore you can actually move them. So they're suggesting that maybe the Mishnah is not like Rebbe, di ki Rebbe. If it's like Rebbe Hamar, didn't he say, kol davar shu mishum shvut lo gazru ala ben hashmashot? Any derabanans are not forbidden ben hashmashot, and therefore it would be okay. So now they say, no, filu tema ki Rebbe. You could explain the Mishnah as going according to Rebbe, which we prefer because all the other Mishnah, remember, were like Rebbe, other than one part that we thought maybe it was the Rabbanan, maybe not. Anyway, we had 2 approaches. But anyway, they say, why? What's it talking about? Where you need a hoe and a spade to dig up, the rocks are so heavy that you can't do it unless you use a hoe and a spade, and that will be forbidden to oraita to start doing that. Then you're like digging up things. That's a problem. And then it's to oraita, not only to rabbanan, and therefore you could say that's the case. Utsricha. Now, why do you need both cases of it rolled out of the tchum and the rocks, there's an avalanche that falls on top of it? Why do you need both? Well, nitzgalgel tzricha de'itani nitzgalgel. If you just had it rolls outside the tchum, what would you say? Well, mishum deleta. Right now, it's not in your tchum, right? And therefore, it's asur deleta gabe. It's not in the space where he was supposed to be. Aval nafal alav gal de'ite gabe emelehave eruv. But maybe when the avalanche falls on top of it, maybe you'd say, well, look, you maybe can't access it, but it's still within the space where you were supposed to put it, so it's okay. Therefore, the Mishnah needed to give that case also. What if you said the itana and you only had nafal alav gal? What would you say? Well, there, mishum de mechase. It's inaccessible because it's covered and you can't get to it. That's why it doesn't work. Aval nitgalgel, but if it rolls out of the tchum, what could you claim? Okay, now it's not in your tchum, but what might happen? Zimnin da'ati zika umaytele. Eruv, and therefore it's tzricha. You might say, look, just like it rolled out, it could theoretically roll back in. The wind could blow the other direction and blow it back in, and therefore maybe it would be okay. Therefore, it needs to tell you both those cases. So each one, they're basically trying to say, each one has something that maybe would have made you think it would be okay, and therefore the Mishnah has to tell you not. Onisraf or truma v'nitmet. Okay, either it burns or the truma becomes impure. Lamali. So why do you need these cases? So now they're going to say, Tana nisraf lehodiacha kol de Rabbi Yossi. When it's nisraf, okay, it burns, it's not here at all. Forget about, it's covered up by rocks. It's non-existent. And yet, despite that, if it's sefek and you're not sure when it happened, still Rabbi Yossi is lenient and says it's okay. Safek Eruvi says kasher. So they wanted to show you, even in the case of nisraf, and it's not even here anymore, he says it's okay. And we're going to do the reverse now with the truma. Tana truma v'nitmet, lo diacha kocho de Rabbi Meir. To tell you how strong Rabbi Meir says it's no good, even if, right? What do we always say about truma shenitmet? It's something that you can't even see with your own eyes, right? Truma looks exactly the same, whether you saw it or whether the truma looks the same, whether it's impure or not. So it looks the same. Maybe you would think that would affect it and we'd be more lenient. No, even so, Rabbi Meir says it's a problem. So now they say, V'sava Rabbi Meir. Okay, so now we've established all the cases and what's unique about all the cases. But now we're going to have a question on Rabbi Meir. V'sava Rabbi Meir, Sveika L'chumra. Does Rabbi Meir say we should go L'chumra here? Why would we think he doesn't? Well, Hatnan, we're going to quote a Mishnah in Mikvaot. Okay, laws of going to the mikvah. Tamei she'arad litbol. Someone goes to go to a mikvah and we're not sure, let's say after they touch, okay, I see someone on the way at the mikvah and then they come in contact with food, with truma food of mine. So, safek taval, safek lo taval. If I have a safek about whether he actually toveled or not, now there's a debate about what does this mean exactly, safek taval, safek no taval. Would it mean that there's a safek about whether he went in the mikvah properly, maybe he didn't do a proper tefillah? In other words, it seemed obvious he was going to the mikvah, but maybe he didn't go all under, maybe I have some reason to be concerned. Whatever reason, I have a reason to be concerned, okay? Or afilu taval, but safek taval ba'arba'im se'ah, safek lo taval ba'arba'im se'ah. Let's say I know he went to the mikvah, but I know that there's a bit of a doubt about this mikvah. It was just at the border of 40 se'ah, and I'm not sure if it had the requisite amount of water needed. Or v'chein shnei mikvaot. All these are classic cases of safek. 2 mikvahs are in the city, let's say, and I know he went to one of them. Be'echad yesh ba'arba'im se'ah, be'echad ein ba'arba'im se'ah. He went in one of them, but I don't know which one he went in, and I know one is no good and one is good. So what do they say? So we're going to assume sfeiko tameh. Okay, this is Tanakama, which we're going to assume is Rabbi Meir, because he's usually the stam opinion in a Mishnah. When does this apply? This is only if it's de'oraita tuma. Okay, if someone was tameh by Torah law, okay, we're going to learn all these cases right now of Rabbanan law, but if they were by Torah law, then we're going to be machmir. Aval b'tum'ah kala, but if it was only a Rabbanan tuma, kigon, and this we saw just the other day, sha'achal ochalin tmeim, v'shatam mashkim tmeim. If he ate a chatzi pras, remember a half a loaf of bread that was tameh, we said normally food doesn't impurify a person, but if you eat a certain amount, right, a larger amount than a kazayit, you eat a half a loaf full of truma food, you become tameh, meaning you have to go to the mikvah before eating truma. Or shatam mashkim tmeim. Here it's interesting, it's a revid, which is the classic shiur. It's not bigger. Drinking, it's going to be even your classic revid of a quarter of a log. You're going to be tameh. The haba, okay, the rabbis say you're tameh. This is by rabbinic law. The haba rosho v'rubo b'mayim shuvim. You put your body, your head and most of your body in water that was collected rainwater, which is normally not good. I'm not going to go back to these cases. These were Rabbanan cases we talked about Tuma in Masechet Shabbat, that you poured 3 log of water of Mayim Shuvim on top of you, this is like a concern. The Baruch of Ruboba Mayim Shuvim, we're concerned there. It's a case where you're tameh, and we're concerned that people will think this is why you're not supposed to shower right after going to the mikvah. People are going to think that was what was mitaher you, and therefore they make you tameh, and you actually have to go back and tovel again. Or shenaflu, right? There's a debate about how long after the mikvah. If you already go home, then it's less of a problem. If you go immediately after into the shower, they say it's a problem based on this. Okay, so anyway, these are cases where Rabbanan they make you tameh. The yarad litbol, and then if you have this tuma Rabbanan on you, and then you go to the mikvah, safek taval, safek lo taval, afilu safek taval, afilu taval, but safek. Safek taval barbim se'ah, safek lo taval barbim se'ah. In other words, either we're not sure if you went to the mikvah at all, or maybe you went to a mikvah that we're not sure was kosher, or you went to a mikvah that maybe didn't have enough water in it, or not, or there were shnei mikvahot. In other words, one we had a doubt about the mikvah itself, if it had 40 se'ah or not. The next one, there's 2 mikvahot, one is kosher, one is not. Again, this is just a repeat of all the first cases. Be'echad yesh barbim se'ah, be'echad ein barbim se'ah. One has 40 se'ah, one doesn't. B'taval be'echad mehem be'eni odea be'ezman taval, and he's not sure which one. Sfeiko tahor. So what do we see? If it's a safek d'Rabbanan, we're lenient. If it's a safek d'oraita, we're machmir. And here you see, and just to show you the end here, Rabbi Yossi mitameh. Even in a d'Rabbanan, Rabbi Yossi is mitameh. So what do you see here? Rabbi Meir in our Mishnah is more stringent, right? Why is that? It doesn't make any sense. Here he's more lenient. So what do they say? Very simply, Kasava Rabbi Meir tchumen d'oraita ninu. Just like their safek d'oraita l'chumra, our case will say that Rabbi Meir holds that tchumen is d'oraita. It's very nice to say, but the Gemara is now going to question this. Wait a minute. Kasava Rabbi Meir tchumen d'oraita? Does he really hold that eruv tchumen is d'oraita, is by Torah law? V'hatznan, imeno yachol lahav li'o להבליעו. בזו אמר רבי דוסטאי בר ינאי משום רבי מאיר, שמעתי שמקדרין בהרים. Okay, what does this mean? Let's say you're measuring. Okay, you're measuring your 2,000 amma. They generally took ropes that were 50 amma long, right? They were, 500 amma long, and they would measure 4 of those to get to 2,000 amma. So now, actually, no, 50 amma, it says. Oh, I was right. It is 50. Okay, I guess they just took a lot of 50 amma ropes, and then they would count to get to 2,000 amma. What if you're measuring in a plane, it's very simple. What if you're measuring when there's, ups and downs? How do you do that? So it says here, the Rabbi Dostai says in the name of Rabbi Meir, that I heard that mikadrim baharim. Okay, what does that mean? That you cut across mountains, meaning, okay, the way they say it is, somebody stands at the bottom. Okay, what it basically means is we draw a flat line on the bottom. Okay, even if, let's say, it's at the top, you're spotted 2,000 amma, it's on the top of a mountain, we draw the line from the bottom, we ignore the elevation. Okay, so how did they do it? They would stand one person with, let's say, a 50 amma rope, and the other person standing at the end there, and then his feet are at the bottom, and then he picks up his hands, right? And then he gives it to the next person at that height. And then they just keep going across, and they ignore all the elevations. Okay, so he says, I heard that this is what we do when it comes to Eruv, with measuring the 2,000 amma. But you can't do this if it's Doraita. How do we know this? Says you can't use this kind of a system when it comes to Torah law. Okay, what are the two things here? Ir miklat, there's not only is the person who kills someone accidentally, he gets protected in the city of refuge. He also gets protected in, I think it's actually, I forget now, I think it's 2,000 amma outside the city. The tchum, right? The tchum of the city, 2,000 amma also protects him. So if he gets killed by the relative in the tchum of the city, and it's outside the city walls, he's still protected, and that person gets the death penalty. Okay, they're not allowed to kill him there. So let's say they kill him there, and they need a measure. So if there's elevations, you take into consideration the elevations. Likewise for Egla Rufa, if they find a dead body and they don't know which city, they measure to the closest city. So also when it comes to Egla Rufa. So here, if you're going to say Tchumin's Doraita, then here Rabbi Meir said, I heard Mekadrim Baharim. You wouldn't do Mekadrim Baharim unless it's the Rabbanan. So what's going to be the answer? Ami Rabbi Tostai Bar Yana Mishum Rabbi Meir. Sorry, I skipped. Shmamina Mekadrim Baharim. No, Lo Kasha. Sorry, I skipped the line. Lo Kasha. Hadidide, Hadirabe. There's his opinion, and then there's opinion he mentions in the name of the rabbis, his rabbi. Notice what he says. I heard, meaning my rabbi taught me this, but that's not my opinion. So we could say his opinion is Tchumin is Doraita, but his rabbi's opinion was Tchumin is Dorabbana. Okay, last thing for today. The Rami Doraita Rabbi Meir. So now we assume he holds Tchumin Doraita, and we're going to be stringent. But now we're going to bring a case of a Doraita of Rabbi Meir where he's not stringent. Titnan. And it's a very similar case. Nagav echa balayla, ve'eno yodeh im chayim met. Ulemachar hishkimu mitza'o met. Rabbi Meir mitzaher v'chachamim mitamim. Shekol ha'tumot kishat mitziatan. These are classic cases of chazaka. Okay, what does it mean chazaka? What was the last time we saw this, right? I put down my eruv. It was in the right spot. But when I come back later, it's not. Do we assume we go by where it was in the beginning, or do we go by the way I see it now? So same thing when it comes to Tuma. If I touch someone at night, and in the morning, right, assuming they can't see at night, so you didn't know if the person was alive or not. In the morning, the person dies. You see the person's dead. You don't know when did they die. So did they die at night, or did they die in the morning? So, or, maybe 5 minutes after you touch them, we don't know. So Rabbi Meir says, you're not tamei. We go by, they were b'chezkat chayim. The last time you saw them, they were alive. The chachamim say no. Tuma goes by the moment we find it. So here, Rabbi Meir seems to be lenient. And by us, he seems to be, it's the same kind of idea. We find something later. Do we go by its original, right? In this case, he said we go by its original state. In the other case, we go by the final state, right? That we assume it was outside the tchum or machmir. And both of these are doraita. Tumat meid is doraita. So we're going to have two answers. One we'll see today, and the other one we'll see tomorrow. The case is where our Mishnah must be talking about Tuma shenitmet. The Tuma, there was a sheretz on it, ben hashmashot. So then, now this is very strange. I thought we said we weren't sure. So they're going to say, Ihachi. Some people say the sheretz was alive. Some people say the sheretz was dead. It's unclear exactly. But anyway, they say, Ihachi, Bahalema, Rabbi Yossi, Safek, Eruv, Kasher. Then why would Rabbi Yossi be mekel here if the sheretz was already on it? So now they say, no. This is what it was. Rabbi Yosef Tamar Travayu, Hacha b'shtei kitei edim maskinan. Echad omeret mibod yom nitma, ve'echad omeret mishachashecha. The debate is, was it tamei? The debate is, we don't know what happened, but we have two sets of witnesses. It's a matter of debate between witnesses. And then the question is, what do we trust? Do we go by the ones who say it was tamei from before? Do we go by the ones that was tamei after? It's not that there's a safek, we don't know exactly what happened, but it's a doubt. Which testimony do we accept? And that's why it's not the same case as we're not sure did we touch it or not. It's more an issue of how do we deal with, we have two contradictory testimonies. Do we say we keep it by its original chazaka? Right? Rabbi Meir says, look, we have two contradictory testimonies that it was, whether it was nitmei before or after, we don't know who to go by. So we basically say, let's keep it whatever we knew it was to begin with, since we don't know how to deal with these testimonies. And Rabbi Yossi will say, no, we're going to be more stringent. Okay, and that explains how we resolve this contradiction. Like I said, tomorrow we'll see another one, and we'll finish here for today. Have a good day. Shavua tov.